that? My heart stopped at the sound of Diana's voice, more so from the moan that somehow reached my ears. I turned to where the sound came from, realizing the direction. The library? Oh god. Are we in like a weird dream space alternate universe thing where James fell for Diana's offer? For lack of a better word? I rushed over and quickly pushed the door open, running inside. What I saw made my heart tear instantly in two. On the ground were Diana and James, both in demon form, embracing each other. James had his face buried in Diana's neck as she clawed at his back, arching against him and moaning into the air. This couldn't be real. This wasn't real. Before I could scream, time seemed to freeze, causing the room and world around me to become still. I looked around, realizing that I could still move, and turned away from the sight.
Do you know why I am showing this to you, human?
Not particularly. Fuck you. There's no good reason to be showing her this, so I'm just gonna go and say it. If this was the angel's attempt to prove something, it was sick and twisted. There was no reason to show this to me, especially when the one I was marrying was engaging with the woman who had wanted to take him away. Engaging with the woman, I like that.
This was the time when Raistra was destined to return to the Abyssal Plains. Isaiah would have convinced him to go home, and they would have consummated their engagement before returning to take their birthrights.
Yeah, but that didn't happen, though. No.
It is the truth. The only event that stopped it from happening was your voyeurism and intrusion.
This is baloney, though, because she just goes after whatever guy that I was interested in the first one. She could have done this with James, when I was on Eric, or Sam, or Matthew, or Damien's route, or any of the human routes, but no, she did not. So, that's her fault, isn't it? I will not let him go.
How selfish. Humans are all selfish creatures. But that is to be expected when safety is handed to them on a silver platter.
The angel was toying with me, and I despised hearing every word it spoke. I turned back around and focused my attention on James, knowing that this was fake, and remembering the real scenario.
Do you understand the full consequences of your actions?
I regret nothing! Upon my final word, the room went black and began to reek of blood. I started to gag and covered my mouth and nose at the horrid smell. What was happening now? Where did the angel take me? I followed Diana's voice to see a crack of light slowly open, revealing Diana. Her face was painted with worry and concern, but upon opening the door, her expression shifted from concern to absolutely broken shock. From the light of the door, I was able to finally see the room I was in. Blood covered every surface, gore decorated every inch, and I was standing a couple of feet from the center where 3 objects laid, probably her parents and her sister. Barely coated in blood, at the center were 2 broken adult-sized crowns and a smaller crown, large enough to barely fit a newborn's head. Diana's eyes darted throughout the room, both in disbelief and in utmost horror. She barely forced herself to step into the room, dropping to her knees in front of the items and bringing them to her chest.
No! No!
My heart broke at the sight of Diana. Tears were streaming down her face as she clutched the crowns against her chest.
Your selfishness cost a kingdom their beloved rulers, and a daughter her only family.
You cannot put that on her or James. You gotta blame the one who did the actual killing. Good grief. I couldn't say anything. I wanted to fight and shout back that I still didn't regret taking James away, but seeing Diana completely broken silenced any will to speak.
I see that you're beginning to understand.
What's done is done. I remember Diana's voice echoing in my memory. She had moved on and was building the rebellion to eradicate the Demon Lord. As terrible as this was the inciting incident that gave Diana the motivation to destroy the Demon Lord. It's true, this could make a positive, because the Demon Lord wouldn't be destroyed if the whole betrothal had gone through as planned. I looked away from Diana, no longer wanting to see her grieve, and glared into the ceiling. The past cannot be changed.
The past is a reminder of our mistakes.
The past is a memory to look back upon, not to bury yourself within. Oh. Before my eyes, the room vanished once again, and I found myself surrounded by flames. What the?
Burn everything to the ground!
Good maniacal laughter. I looked around, trying to find the source and direction of the voice. This was just an illusion, but the heat of the flames seemed too real to ignore or shake off.
This was the last thing many lives were forced to see before dying at the hands of a madman Demon Lord.
Which he had been doing a long time before I entered the picture. Stop it! I gripped my head, shutting my eyes tightly. I didn't want to see anymore. I didn't want to be here any longer. If this was the angel's torture, this was truly unbearable.
Do you not see the price of your selfishness? You are the sole reason why millions of lives have been lost. You are the sole reason why an entire world is burning. Your love causes death. Your love will do nothing but bring you pain and suffering for all of eternity. Every minute you hold on to this false hope is another child dying, another kingdom falling, another battle waged. Give him up.
Why are you trying so hard, though? I don't understand. It's not like her giving him up now is going to make him magically go and marry Diana, and then that's magically going to appease the Demon Lord, and he's not going to kill everything. What are the angels trying to get at? I don't understand their motivations at all in this. All at once, my head became filled with cries and screams of people I didn't know of. Pain from men, women, and children echoed in my mind as I gripped at my head, wanting it to stop. The heat around me was unbearable. I could barely stand it. I love him! No, this wasn't happening. I needed to get out of here. I shouted to the skies, knowing the angel would hear me. However, I rushed forward through the flames surrounding me, hoping to break free somehow. What I managed to do was break through some sort of glass wall, destroying the world around me.
Love!
Whoa! I fell to the floor, surrounded by shattered glass. Shaking my head, I quickly looked up, recognizing the sight before me from a nightmare. James was bolted to a wall with a burnt cross over his chest. He stared wide-eyed at me, uncaring of the bubbling heat dancing over the new scar, as cloaked figures turned their heads towards me. I didn't have to look at them to know that they were angels. From what I knew, they had holy magic that could disable demon magic, so fighting with any form of magic I knew was not a good idea. However, I was a human. I had pure physical force. I quickly jumped back up and squared off, ready to take on my husband's captors. Aw, you didn't even marry him yet, and you're already referring to him as your husband. How sweet. In an act of supreme rage, James's body began to glow an intense gold color, the light flickering around his body like a raging flame.
Enough!
Ooh. Hey! The demon boy's back. Within a matter of seconds, light suddenly engulfed the room, blinding everyone in it. I covered my eyes with my arms, trying to block the light to no avail. As it finally faded, I looked up to see James in his demon form with eyes fully glossed in gold, and no Sam or Damien to cover my eyes this time.
This ends now!
Ooh. The cloaked figures quickly conjured chains in their hands, but not fast enough to avoid James forming a familiar-looking gold pistol in his hand and shooting down his attackers. What shocked me was how they fell. Instead of them falling to the ground, as the bullet ripped through the cloaks, the fabric burnt away and the ash vanished into the air as if blown away by wind.
Filthy demon! Your acts shall not go unpunished!
Send every angel in heaven at me! I will not let you touch her again!
Taking the chance, I rushed over to James and wrapped my arms around him at last. My body felt at ease while holding him as he wrapped his free arm around my waist and held me close. I could feel power radiating off of his skin, tickling my nerves. Whoa. Well, that's new. As a large gold pentagram appeared at our feet, a third cloaked being stepped up from the far end of the room, stepping over the glass I had broken through and fallen on. James tightened his grip around me and aimed at the figure.
You cannot escape your destiny.
As it finished, James fired a shot at the angel. The bullet ripped into the cloak, but the figure did not die like his companions. James didn't seem to care.
That was your one warning.
We do not fear you.
Come after her again, and I will teach you the meaning of fear.
With an angry snarl that reverberated through the room, the cloaked figure bent forward towards us, showing its veiny hands. From its back sprouted two large and proud white wings, riddled with hundreds of gorgeously placed feathers. However, before the angel could lunge for us, we sank into the ground at last, escaping into darkness. James gripped me tightly as I held on to him, guiding me through the void we were in. Into the darkness we both sank. I shut my eyes, scared of where we were going, but knowing that everything was all right now that James was with me. I was safe in his arms. Sorry I investigated, sweetie. When we finally came out of the dark, we were standing in the middle of the war room, where everyone seemed to have gathered.
Whoa!
Whoa!
Hey, what the hell?
Oh my god, you're all right.
James and I looked around, seeing the shocked and surprised faces of the rebel leaders, the Incubi Brothers, and their wives. However, looking to Diana, her face instantly melted from surprise to anger. Oh. James released me as Diana suddenly marched at him, staring at her with a blank expression. The expression stayed as Diana slammed her palm across his cheek, the sound reverberating through the room. Did I miss something?
Hey! Do you both realize how long you have been missing?
You were worried, I get it.
2 days.
Do you realize how many assets we have spent in preparing to find you both?
Diana...
Do not apologize! I don't want to hear it!
Diana turned and walked back to her spot, crossing her arms and curling her shoulders over herself.
If you two had died, this war would have been for nothing.
Why? I frowned, understanding what she meant. Because of us, the war happened, so we had to take responsibility. However, now is not the time to get angry. Diana, we're back now. That's all that matters. Once again, silence took control of the air before Diana took in a deep breath and let out a sigh, relaxing at last. The very last thing I wanted was for Diana to explode about this.
Were they angels?
Yes.
Did you kill them to escape?
2 of them.
Diana turned her head and looked at James in slight surprise.
You realize that killing angels of heaven will put a bounty on your head, correct?
Is that worse than what just happened to us? I silently gulped, remembering the angel swearing to punish James for what he did. James didn't seem to be fazed as he wrapped an arm around me.
Let them come. I will not let them hurt her again.
My cheeks warmed a bit as I looked up at James, seeing him smile lovingly at me. I smiled back, seeing the deep and pure emotions he felt for me within his eyes. He would protect me with all of his might, and I would be with him for as long as I could. With a sigh, Diana rubbed her temple and turned around, glaring at me and James. Her look could kill, but I knew that beneath her anger she was relieved to see us. In a strange way, I could see the amusement behind her hard glare.
Well, now that everyone is accounted for, we are set. We are ready to march on to the Demon Lord's castle and end this once and for all. Are you two prepared?
The realization of the date hit me. If we had been missing for 2 days, then we were an evening away from heading out to the final battle. Fear quaked my core for a moment, but my embrace with James shook it away. So we missed 2 days of training. That's unfortunate.
We leave in the morning?
That's the plan. Get some rest, you two. You both need it.
Without letting anyone interfere or interrupt her, Diana turned and left the room. I smiled a bit, knowing that, deep in her heart, she cared about us. The other rebels left as well, most likely going to prepare themselves.
Dude, what's on your chest?
Yeah, about that. Sam pointed at the cross on James's chest, making everyone look at it. I bit my lip, but James waved his hand dismissively.
A battle scar, nothing more.
A scar that still needs to be examined.
Eric walked over along with Damien, and both demons began to investigate it.
All right. Love, you can go back to the room if you want. I'll be there shortly.
I nodded, feeling sudden exhaustion hit me hard. I yawned and waved to the others before I walked out of the room, making my way toward our bed. I would have felt a little worried about going by myself. Last time I went to our room by myself, I got angel napped, and then we disappeared for 2 days, and bad things happened. As I left, I searched for Diana. Time had passed, and I knew that now was the moment to get my deserved answers. At least I wasn't being followed, so I began to scour the castle, trying to find where Diana had gone off to. Oh. At the sound of Sero clearing his throat, I quickly turned around and saw Sero look to me, as if he was waiting for me to turn around and face him. As I did, he nodded his head and gestured to follow him. I did, following him into a new branch of the castle I had not been in before. I was stunned to see such a place, but as I walked on, the air seemed to grow fresher with each step. Eventually, I was led to a door. Sero slowly opened it, and I could only stare at what I had been presented. Wow. A large forest, obviously hidden and bound by magic, stretched as far as my eyes could see past the door. As I stepped out, I could feel that I was somehow in another void, some sort of protected place in the castle. I continued to walk in, taking in the sights around me. The trees were lush, and the air was as fresh as the countryside in the human world. Despite the feeling of magic around me, I could tell that this place was an untainted sanctuary. Oh, that's beautiful. Soon enough, however, I stopped at the sight of Diana, kneeling by a large and beautiful pink and purple tree. She had her head bowed, as if she was praying, so I very slowly walked up beside her, wondering what she was doing. The song she was muttering was unfamiliar, but the sight in her hands made me silently gasp in surprise. A small silver crown, barely large enough to fit a newborn's head, rested in her hands as Diana stared down at it lovingly. The way she held it on her palm showed its significance, as if it could break at the smallest movement. After a moment, Diana lowered it to the base of the tree alongside 2 beautiful gold crowns that looked to be freshly polished and welded. As Diana pulled her hands away, she looked to me with a slight frown.
This was my punishment.
This? Diana nodded and turned her head back to the crowns.
Before I went to the human world, I was a simple princess. I studied every topic of knowledge known to the Abyssal Plains, and trained to one day become a strong and powerful queen. That was all thanks to my mother and father.
My eyes drifted to the 2 crowns, realizing the significance. Diana continued.
Months before I was supposed to be wed to James, my mother and father told me that I was going to have a baby sister. I couldn't have been any happier. Every descendant of Lilith is born a single child, but to have a sibling...
The small crown caught my attention as Diana let out a shaky sigh but kept speaking.
I vowed to protect her and my parents, knowing that the wedding would ensure our kingdom's safety. But when I arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, I was told that the wedding was cancelled, and the agreement that kept my kingdom safe was on the verge of dissolving, because my husband and his brothers had run off.
It's weird for her to still refer to him as her husband, considering we were just about to get married, but, you know, continue.
My instinct was to run back home, protect my city and my family at all costs. But another urge struck me at the same time.
What do you mean? Diana looked up at the tree's leaves, causing me to do the same. On each branch were a plethora of purple fruits that resembled peaches. I was stunned to see so many hidden beneath the leaves of the tree, but Diana's answer caused me to look back at her attentively.
In the kingdom of heaven, there is a city called Yggdrasil. It runs like clockwork, and the spirits that live there are the ones who influence everything that happens in the human world. The weather, the environment, everything.
I stared wide-eyed at Diana. There was a city that was devoted to that? How the hell did that even work? Diana continued, trying to ease my confusion.
There are beings in that city called muses.
Ah.
Powerful beings who have a gift given to them by the ruler of heaven, called suggestion. It gives them the ability to strongly encourage people to do something in their lives, whether it be bad or good. One muse, however, is powerful enough to live outside of the city, and decided to make a very, very strong suggestion to me for the sake of her story.
I tried to take everything in. I expected an answer, but this seemed ridiculous. Muses? Suggestion? How is this all possible? Demons were one thing, but having the ability to control people with suggestion? That was way too overpowered to even be real. I mean, that's basically what succubi and incubi do. They, put out the sexual suggestions, and then they control people with that. So, at the end of Seduce Me, Kay was there when Simon was turned into a human. And Simon was turned into a human because Kay suggested to Diana to turn him into a human for story purposes. That's kind of interesting. Okay, anyway, continue, Diana, before I get too deep into a rabbit hole before you even explain everything.
This muse needed a proper villain for her story. One who had everything to lose, but no way to try and protect what she had. A stubborn princess who was willing to kill for the sake of her kingdom.
Someone willing enough to kill a human. Diana nodded, silently swallowing her grief.
While my heart told me to return to my kingdom, my mind became obsessed with finding the boys and bringing them home. I begged the Demon Lord to let me find them and bring them back, and he agreed to hold off any invasion until I returned.
Which he didn't keep.
I dissected the castle, looking through every nook and cranny, trying to find any hints to where they had gone. When I found the remnants of the gate spell your grandfather used to bring them to the human world, my mind suddenly latched on to getting through without a second thought.
Diana looked away from me, lowering her head in shame.
Without thinking it through, I recast the gate spell and used the remainder of that man's life to enter the human world. I didn't realize what I had done until the gate closed and he took his last breath.
You were there when he died?
I was. The gate spell was connected to him. So when I opened it back up, it sent me straight to him and allowed me to use his life energy.
I watched as Diana lifted her hands and stared into them, slightly shaking.
When I realized what I had done, I became racked with grief. I ran as far as I could from his body, changing myself into a human, and simply ran until I couldn't any longer. I had taken away the life of a human, something demons are not allowed to do unless it was to protect the secrets of magic.
I see.
I feared the angels would hunt me down, but as I rested, I suddenly became filled with unjustified purpose and confidence. I repurposed my disguise to match how I really looked, and found myself on the hunt for the Incubi.
All of this was because of a muse?
Muses are dangerous beings, dear. While they cannot completely control you, their suggestions are as powerful as your natural instincts. This muse didn't want her villain to wallow in grief, but to become the perfect enemy for her main character.
This is so funny and meta. But why does Kay care about Angel? I mean, Kay runs a tea shop in the human world. Why is she interested in Angel? Why is Angel her main character? Is Angel even real? I got so many questions. Me? Diana nodded once more.
A love story that would wreck the 5 worlds. A romance of a human and a demon prince. When the love of a human is said to be impossible to gain, could a simple human have the strength to obtain it with her heart?
Sounds like a compelling story. It all made sense. Diana killed my grandfather, who granted me his mansion, where I met the Incubi. All of the pieces of my past were aligned with Diana being both a victim of circumstance, the inciting incident of my life, and the villain I had to go up against. Whoops. Oh yeah, I'm using my mouse again. I completely forgot about that. Whoops. I stared at my knees, feeling my mind jumble at piecing everything together. My life was written out by someone beyond my control. I started to question everything. Were any of the choices I made in my life my own? Don't question that too much, girl. Sensing my fear, Diana placed a hand on my shoulder, and I felt her calm my anxiety. As I looked up at her, she gave me a sad smile.
Before you think that your life is a lie, know that a muse only has the ability to focus on one individual when making their suggestion. Every choice you made was of your own design, even the part when you told me off.
I looked deep into Diana's eyes, seeing her sincerity and wisdom of the words she spoke. I felt relieved that I was in control of my life, but to have a story laid out for me was something I wasn't prepared to completely take in. Maybe it was better to be ignorant. I shook my head and attempted to change the subject. That doesn't explain what that copycat was. Diana chuckled and moved to sit on her hip. Sit on her hip? Oh, I see, I understand. Looking to me with a hand over her lap.
Well, I am a very powerful succubus, as you well know. I couldn't just let a muse completely use me. So after I stole your energy that night, before I returned home, I forced the suggestion out of my soul, hoping to be rid of it forever. Unfortunately, when I returned and found my kingdom in flames, my grief resurrected it, and it became a permanent part of me, haunting me and reminding me of what I could have been. A ruthless, cruel temptress that could have killed another human to get her way.
That's very interesting. I like this. This is very, very well written.
It forced me to believe that everything was my fault, and in a way, it was. I wasn't strong enough to stop the suggestion from taking over. It became the source of my madness, controllable at first, but fueled by each fight I fought with the Demon Lord.
It made sense. If Diana herself had madness, then fighting the Demon Lord made it worse. That's why it became powerful enough to become its own being. What if it consumed her? I shivered at the idea of the cruel Diana returning, making Diana giggle a bit.
Don't worry, dear. That copycat is no longer here. I don't think I can ever revert back to who I was. But I promise that the woman who destroyed your grandfather's life is gone.
Well, what are you going to do now? After another soft chuckle, Diana looked at the magic sky beyond the tree line.
I think I'll save this world, and help it grow for as long as I can. It's what my family would have wanted.
What about what you want? Diana's happiness was important as well. Now that she was free of her guilt and obligation, she could choose her life. She could be with that hot guy Sarah, you know? You know, girl? Just a suggestion. Oh, I better not make any suggestions. She's had a lifetime of suggestions. She's done. Diana looked at her feet and shook her head.
What I want does not matter. It never has. What is important is this world and its safety.
For once, I was able to understand what the copycat meant by her having a golden heart. I felt a little envious and a little pity for her. Hopefully she would be truly happy just helping the demon world without expecting anything in return. I left her by the tree to prepare for the morning. We needed to rest, and Diana wanted to be alone with her family one last time before the siege.
Hey.
Huh? What is it?
Keep everything that happened between us. I'm asking sincerely.
Of course. With a nod, I smiled and made a silent promise to keep quiet. With that, I returned to my room. I finally returned to our room and flopped onto the bed, letting the events of my time in the Abyssal Plains replay in my mind. I was trapped here, hunted by angels, and soon enough I was about to go marching into battle against the Demon Lord for my freedom. But we did help Diana fight off her muse, so that was a good thing. The more I thought about it, the more surreal the feeling became. I was going to be in a room, meeting a powerful adversary face to face, and set myself free of the curse he brought down upon me. Add that I was captured by angels and almost killed by them made the time I had spent away from the human world very wild. It felt like a dream, but I knew it couldn't have been one. This was too vivid, too real to be even close to a dream. As James entered the room at last, I smiled and stood, walking over and wrapping my arms around him as he returned my embrace.
God, I was so worried about you.
And I was worried about you. We held each other, locked in silence and unable to say anything more. We had been in a heavy predicament, and we escaped. Sure, we were probably branded now, but we escaped nonetheless. All we could do in the moment was hold each other and listen to our synchronized heartbeats. As the thought of tomorrow danced in my head, I began to fear it even more. Was I ready to go into battle? Was James? Were any of us, for that matter? We were about to walk into the final battle of a world war. Would we survive? Would I live to see James afterward and feel his embrace again? Tomorrow brought too many questions to think about, and I became frustrated and scared. Let's not just go to sleep. Nah. What a cuddle. This is sad, though. This is like a sad making love. Just in case. Ugh. Okay, we can do this. I needed to hold him and treat the night like it was the last night of the world. Tomorrow was unpredictable, but tonight was guaranteed. I slowly glided my hands to cup his head, looking up at him and staring deep in his eyes. I felt his hands gently slide across my waist, softly grasping my hips as he stared patiently at me. A rush of courage ran through my body as I gently pulled him forward and captured his lips with my own. My eyes fluttered closed as I took a deep breath, taking in his scent, his warmth, his love for me. I was blessed to have this man as my own, and to see him claw through destiny to remain with me and be mine. As he slid his hands up my back and hugged me closer to him, I could tell he felt the same. My head tilted back as James began to trail kisses down my chin and onto my neck, causing me to arch back a bit and press my chest against his. As his teeth lightly grazed my skin, a wild shiver ran up my spine. His hands tightened around my waist and tugged me hard against his body as he ravished my neck and shoulder in kisses and licks. My own hands began to wander his hair, combing through his black locks. For one more night, I would forget about everything except the feeling of this man and I making love. It wasn't long before James and I wound up in bed, with me straddled over his lap with my back to his chest, us in only our bare minimums. Do go on. James marked every inch of my body with his lips and tongue, desperate to make me quake in his arms from the pleasure. I couldn't help but let myself grind over the hardening length in his boxer briefs, my own core lighting in desire for him, and slightly craving to just ravish and ride. Hashtag ravish and ride. Moving on. However, James's hands drifted along my body, making me submissive to his touch and guidance. I was left to moan and mule at his fingers dragging themselves over me and eventually teasing me beneath my clothes. The wild moans that wanted to erupt from me at his strokes filled my head with a lustful haze as James began to enthrall me and kiss hard over my shoulder. I began to bite my lip, trying to control them.
Don't hold it in.
As if to emphasize his command, he began to remove our last articles of clothing, turning me around in his arms and pinning me against the bedposts. I had to wrap my legs around him to keep myself up as he pressed my hips against the wood of the bed. I looked deep into James's eyes, becoming lost in them as I finally let go, feeling him take me at last and letting the pleasure ripple through my body in waves. My arms wrapped themselves around his neck as he pressed me against the wall and began to drive into me in a loving but hard fervor. My energy was slowly draining, but I didn't care. My mind was becoming a mess, but I didn't care. All I gave a damn about at that point in time was James and I holding each other and riding through the immense pleasure between us. James knew everything about me. How to make me melt, how to make me keen. He loved to use everything in his power to make me feel absolutely loved and amazing, while I did my best to make him feel the same. Even as the end began to crash through us, our eyes spoke volumes of our deep passion and love for each other. My heart pounded wildly for James, and I dared to claim him as mine. He was completely and utterly mine, as I was completely and utterly his. Joyful tears gently dripped down my eyes from the feelings bursting in my heart, but I gripped James close, desperate not to let go. He did the same, pressing his lips to mine and capturing every loving sound I made for him. I lost count of how many times we let ourselves go. I became absorbed in his kisses, his touches on my body, our love, that I was barely awake by the time it all ended, with his arms around me. His breathing became my guide, and his body my solace. My hands gripped to him as my body naturally cuddled close to him, taking in his warmth. A small chuckle echoed from him as James petted my hair.
I love you so much.
I love you too, James. I will never let you go. We would survive. We would be okay, as long as we're on the good ending route. I felt safe in James's arms, and I'm sure he felt safe in mine. We would return to the human world and be okay. Tomorrow would decide everything.